Hello, everyone. My name is Tamuna Revazova. I work at Transparency International Russia, which is a chapter of the Global Transparency International movement. Today, we are organizing a welcoming discussion as a part of the Fighting Corruption with Art Open Contest, which is implemented jointly with the Foundation for Democratic Development, and it's aimed at the attraction of Russian and American artists, both professionals and amateurs, for the creation of a virtual exhibition which will depict the various forms of corruption. Using visualization as a powerful educational tool, which speaks both to analytical abilities and human emotions. The contest will attract a new audience to a discussion about corruption and its influence on society. We know that a lot of people are against corruption and are willing to root it out, and we strive to unite those who want greater transparency, integrity, and accountability in all areas of public life. We know that art can capture people's attention and turn their minds on, so we hope to help create strong anti-corruption imagery and improve the public's understanding of corruption and its negative effects. But we also want to help people envision a world free of corruption, and we want people to see the way to make it happen and achieve this goal together. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm looking forward to our discussion, but first of all, let me introduce you our speakers today. Margarita Kiryushkina, who is an art dealer, strategy and business development for the Digital Archive, NFT specialist, and the founder at Digital Art Consultancy, Neue projects. And Michael McNeir, who is CEO at Forum Financial Advisory and Training Solutions CRL, and former detective and financial investigator with the Metropolitan Police New Scotland Yard. Margarita and Michael will share their insights into the various forms of corruption and discuss the possibilities of artistic expression on the topic of corruption and anti-corruption. And of course, we would like to engage you in this discussion afterwards. Thank you. Margarita, you're...
Yeah, shall we start? So first of all, thank you so much to the committee, to the moderators, Marina, Tamuna, Rima. Thank you so much for having me. Other guest speaker, Michael McNeir, and to everyone attending. It's my honor to be invited and speak here today. So I would like to formally introduce myself. My name is Margarita Kiryushkina, as Tamuna has just said. I was born and raised in Moscow, in Russia, and I moved to New York over 2 years ago to work within the art market. So I have my art dealership and advisory called Neue projects, where I advise clients facilitate art dealing on the primary and secondary market. Simultaneously, I'm very much invested in the digital world and Web 3.0 space. Today, Neue projects is bridging traditional contemporary art with NFTs, also known as crypto art. Where I'm working with a team of 6 on an NFT photography project that successfully was launched at the end of November, where we released 60 images as one-on-one NFTs, and they were sold immediately. So the first photographer involved in this new venture is the 78-year-old New Yorker Lawrence Horn, and who has kept his works hidden for over 40 years. But I will dive deep into this topic like later on. So prior to moving to New York, I was working in finance and fintech, and given this background, I was always in tune with current anti-corruption policies that were heavily reinforced in these fields. That was interesting to observe that as I entered the art industry in the US, I've noticed that corruption is something of normality within the multi-billion-dollar market that primarily operates within the United States and is in fact controlled by key players like the auction houses, multinational galleries, private art dealers, and high-status collectors. So before we dive deep into the conversations of types of corruption and how to deal with it in the art market, I would like to emphasize that corruption is endemic to humankind, and the art world becomes one of the leading industries ready-made for corruption. So art is inherently an attractive tool for money laundering because, as we know, paintings are, unlike real estate, already portable, so it's like easy to transform it. And the law does not always require disclosure of the buyer or seller's true identity. So unlike real estate, where ownership can be traced to a deed, the only available chain on title for most artworks is its provenance, which is commonly falsified or not readily verified. So having this said, let us explore this topic in more depth. And in my opinion, corruption in the art world is threefold. Firstly, the most obvious corruption that takes place in the art market is that of money laundering. Individuals and corporations have been laundering money through different schemes of buying and selling artworks to execute these corrupt deals for many, many years. And secrecy, anonymity, because shell companies are used to hide the identities of owners, as well as lack of regulations, create an environment that is perfect for money laundering and evading sanctions. To provide you with more in-depth understanding of how one launders money in the art world, I want to give you an example. So let's imagine that someone has $10 million in hand. They could buy Picasso and, at an auction house, let's say in Geneva, and have the painting immediately moved to the storage at a free port or high security storage near the airport, right? So the painting could be then anonymously sold without ever moving an inch, and then the new buyer would have it retrieved for the same free port. Suddenly, the original buyer turned seller and has money from that is considered a legitimate business deal. So the Economist estimated that in 2018, that Geneva Freeport might hold over 100 billion worth of US art sitting tucked away in a space that it also functions as a tax haven. So besides Freeports, auctions provide another gray hotspot to purchase art with funds that are questionable. Even though auction houses work closely with regulatory bodies to implement and update anti-money laundering policies in place, these said policies are easily circumvented and no concrete law exists that reinforces the disclosure of the identities of buyers and sellers. I would love to empathize this point by comparing the disclosure principles in real estate sales versus artwork sales. So then you sell a home, you transfer the ownership via the deed, a legally binding document that details the sale of and other paperwork, including the title that lists the name of the current buyer and the names of individuals or corporations that previously owned the property, right? So however, then someone sells an artwork at auction house, even something worth 100 million, the identity is typically concealed and referenced as coming from an important US or European collection. So the buyer usually has no idea who the seller is and vice versa. And surprisingly, even the auction houses, like those institutions, might not know the full extent, not know to the full extent who the buyer or seller is. Let me give you an example. So a collector has accused Sotheby's of selling his 60 million painting by Henry Toulouse-Lautrec without actually knowing who the rightful owner was. So the Toulouse-Lautrec work, Our Lead Levassier, consigned for sale at Sotheby's in London in 2015, depicts two women embracing on the bed. So the Swiss dealer who brought this work to the Sotheby's, Yves Bouvert, signed the standard paperwork surrounding such a sale, which requires the consignor to indicate he or she owns the painting or is authorized to sell it. So after the sale, Bouvert was given the proceeds. But the real owner was a trust controlled by Dmitry Rybolovlev, a Russian billionaire who had been using Mr. Bouvert as his art advisor and art dealer. So Mr. Rybolovlev agreed at that point that he had authorized the sale, but says Sotheby's should have at least checked who the real owner was before turning over the money. But that's something common because auction houses leave off their fees, which normally reaches up to 25% of the deal. They earn for brokering sales such as the seller's commission and buyer's premium. Therefore, it makes sense that these ventures both value and trust customers who bring a substantial amount of business, like in this case of this example with Mr. Bover, who bought and sold works valued in total of multiple hundreds of millions US dollars. So finally, private transactions through art dealers and galleries do not even have any policies in place, and they usually go with their instincts. The US has been more attuned to ensuring that tax evasion and money laundering are fought hats on by implementing further disclosures on sales. Yet it's not known that impact it will have on making the art world more transparent. And I want to share with you something that I learned and I was surprised by. The arts in the US contribute more to the national economy than does the construction, transportation, warehousing, travel, tourism, mining, utilities, and agriculture industries. And that was really surprising for me. So art is a trading economy that reaches approximately $70 billion a year. Yet there is a little zero of proof that proof of title that establishes clear ownership of the artwork. The most an owner receives is an invoice, which is something that can be easily manipulated. In addition, we can go as far back in history as one can do and state that throughout the past centuries, different ethnicities suffered confiscation of jewelry, artworks, and significant cultural objects, and most recently before and during the Second World War. The only way to determine the potential of an artwork or object to be a part of the looting is through the art loss register. And even then, restitution to the rightful owners is usually a very lengthy process and very painful. So thirdly, I believe that forgery is another huge issue with the art world and is more common with old masters and modern art, categories that tend to achieve record-breaking prices at auction houses and are at times forged. So then it comes to forgery. With the help of forensics, most fraudulent paintings can be easily identifiable. But then again, sometimes forgery looks more real than the original. And unfortunately, every year, fakes and forgeries are revealed in museums, private collections, and galleries. So let me dive into some examples about that. The Museum of Fine Arts in Ghent exhibited 26 fake works which were on loan from a collector. The painting by 20th century Russian artist Kazimir Malevich and Vasily Kandinsky were thought to be fake by scholars who noted that the works were not included in any of the artist's catalog raisonnées. So I will explain that catalog raisonnées are comprehensive studies collected over a long time period that catalogs each work produced by a given artist. So the art newspaper stated that those works, they have no exhibition history, have never before been reproduced in serious scholarly publications, and have no traceable sales records. And in addition to that information, the museum did not carry out specific analysis on the works because it is only standard policy for acquisitions. And in this case, those works were like on a loan from a collector. So also was reported by Telegraph, it's a British newspaper, that a collection of 21 paintings by Amedeo Modigliani, which were on exhibition at Genoa's Palazzo Ducale, were announced as a fake, aside from one. Modigliani is one of the most copied artists in the world, and his paintings sell into the millions. Marc Restillini, a French expert on Modigliani, believes that there are over 1,000 fake Modigliani paintings in the world, and the exhibition at this Genoa's Palazzo Ducale was closed, and the paintings were handed over for the investigation. The last example I would give to share with you dates back to 2019. Then a report by Switzerland's Fine Art Expert Institute stated that at least half of the work circulated in the art market is fake. And unfortunately, unless all dealers, museums, auction houses, and collectors are willing to pay for the scientific analysis, research, and obtaining an expert opinion, there is no way to read the market of fakes and forgeries. Additionally, many authentication boards and art experts are becoming more unwilling to authenticate works due to the chances of being sued for a wrong attribution or refusing to authenticate the work at all. Because there are a lot of like not circumstances, but like it might be like really questionable like territory for them. And now I would like to come to a really like, you know, good part of my speech is I would like to take a moment and introduce you to some way how the art market can be improved, because there are ways. And I feel like it's imperative to talk about the future ways on how to prevent corruption from recurring within the art world. Then it comes to money laundering and forgeries. I think like further laws need to be implemented, and it's more like on the governmental level. And then it comes to corruption within ownership and provenance. I believe that like nowadays blockchain technology can help to facilitate transparency that is securely stored and also backed by a smart contract as utilized by the Ethereum blockchain. So I will dive deep into this topic, and I will explain what NFT is, because it's still a new thing on the market. And I know that a lot of people heard what cryptocurrencies is, like what blockchain is, but just like a little part of those people understand what it really is, and I would love to share that. So NFTs, NFT is a non-fungible token. And this is a special kind of crypto asset in which token is unique, as opposed to fungible assets like Bitcoin and dollar bills, which are all worth exactly the same amount. Because every NFT is unique, it can be used to authenticate ownership of digital assets like artworks. So like it will store the provenance on the blockchain, which would be visible for everybody and accessible. So why I think like NFTs are a great source to deal with the corruption within the art market. So you can think of NFTs as being kind of like certificates of authenticity for digital artifacts, right? So they're currently being used to sell a huge range of virtual collectibles. Each NFT is stored on an open blockchain, often Ethereum, and anyone interested can track them as they're created, sold, resold, as the information is decentralized, and that's why it cannot be manipulated. Because the technology, in this instance, Ethereum, is based on proof of stake, NFTs can be set up in a way to provide the reliable provenance from collector to collector, while also providing the artist the possibility to earn royalties across any secondary sale. So, which means that the artist will earn a percentage of each subsequent sale. So, for example, a contemporary artist like George Condo could sell his physical works via the smart contract and could collect royalties for the rest of the NFT's life. So it's a lifelong royalties, which is incredible. And finally, like artists have a chance to be compensated as they should have. So NFTs have raised fascinating philosophical questions about the nature of ownership, wondering why digital artifacts that can be endlessly copied and pasted have any value at all. So here I also have an example for you. You can take a nice picture of Mona Lisa at the Louvre, but it's not Mona Lisa. It doesn't have any value because it doesn't have the provenance or history of the work like stored on the blockchain. So the reality here is that NFTs are very, very valuable because it is the input of the artist that matters. And with the help of the blockchain, you can easily track this information. So it's like really accessible. Let us quickly dive into the current situation of the NFT market. So right now, there are a lot of profile picture projects which are like mostly like generative art. And in my opinion, it will lose 95% of their value over the course of the coming years. In a way, these projects very much repeat the history of modern and contemporary art, if we think of it. And yeah, the artistic perspective within these NFT collections can be compared to the practice of Marcel Duchamp. And what I mean by that is the innovative approach to modern art as pursued by Duchamp was not as monetarily valued as what it is happening with the within the VAP 3.0 space, where projects make millions of dollars in less than a couple of hours, and all the artists are compensated. So to sum it up, the belief that art dealing can be reimagined through an honest and transparent approach is fundamental to me, and also like to my business partner at Neue projects, which is the reason why we are positioning ourselves to become the leading artist-focused consultancy and marketplace within the VAP 3.0. And currently, Neue projects is collaborating with the creative agency Bustani, where we create the digital archive, bringing the analog film photography collection into the NFT space. The photographer Lawrence Horn is the first featured artist, showcase his work with his never before seen photography collection. These unique images were captured during 70s and 80s on the infrared film, and right now, like, it's allowing the possibility for anyone to own historically significant works digitally. After holding back his work for nearly 40 decades, it wasn't like shown to the public. Lawrence's scanned archive is now available as one-on-one NFTs. I mean, it's really interesting, like, to be working like on this project, because given the fact that it's really connected to the digital world, the story behind it is really humanistic, because like we collaborated with Bustani agency, and in fact, it's like 7 under 30 like people who randomly met this artist in the Thompson Square Park and just like for some reason connected. And we've learned his story, and his story is very interesting and magical. And the fact like that at his age of 78, he met a group of young people who were like really invested in his art and understood it. We decided to actually like help Lawrence and like put his archive into the digital, but the intention was to actually accumulate some money and to improve his living situation, because he was living in the poverty with a like really how do I put this, like with a really not mentally stable roommate who was an alcoholic, and he lived there like for over 10 years on an air mattress, and he was about to be kicked out on the street. And like thanks to this like NFT drop we did like back in November, we were able to actually move him from his terrible living situation, and now he's living in his own apartment with new glasses, new clothes, and he's like enjoying the solitude he deserves. So I guess like at this note, I would love to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I'm happy to answer your questions if you have any, and you can also email me or schedule a call if you would like to engage in deeper conversation about the art market and VAP 3.0. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margarita. So, Michael, can you please?
Thank you very much. I do have a small presentation, a visual presentation as well. I'm having an issue, as I said to Marina, about sharing the screen. So if someone could start the slideshow in a short while. Just a very brief introduction. Thank you very much, Margarita, for a very informative and exciting presentation. And I thank also the organisers at Transparency International, and also the people that are watching this webinar in the US, Europe, and no doubt elsewhere as well. So just a little bit about me. Well, my background is from law enforcement, as mentioned before. I was a detective and financial investigator with the Metropolitan Police New Scotland Yard in London. I worked on the Homicide and Serious Crime Command, which I don't think really needs any explanation. Very important cases from day one to the last day as well, you know, serial killers and things like this. But that's moving away from the art. So we use financial investigations there to actually utilize a profiling of people, tracking people, and getting further evidence as well, which then led me to go on to the organised crime unit. And this is here where it sort of focuses a little bit on what we're talking about here today as well. So I was on the what we call the London Asset Confiscation Enforcement Team. So if we had, and I'll just explain just very, very quickly, is if we have a criminal, should we say a drug dealer, they're going to make money. So say 500,000 euros, just as one example. So we get them on that particular investigation. Second investigation is the financial side. What assets do they have? And this obviously in the UK or indeed elsewhere. We work very closely with various embassies in London. There's too many to list. And we can actually seize the assets from around the world as well, as long as there is a memorandum and an agreement by the governments as well that's in place. So this is what we did. And with the art as well, so say art is part of corruption, part of money laundering. There's many areas, you know, where you can launder your money through private education as well, art, antiquities, cultural objects as well. So for example, say we were going to the house there to seize some assets and we were going there, we would take someone from an auction house which was assigned to the Metropolitan Police, and we would have experts from that particular auction house that would come in with us. They'll be listed on the search form which is given to the person where you are. And of course, as a law enforcement officer, you wouldn't always know if that painting on the wall or that object on the table is valuable or not. We wouldn't know so much. But with the person from the auction house, they would be able to say, take that one, don't take that one, that's a waste of time. And this was very good for law enforcement to have these experts with us as well, because the article itself is innocent, but it could be damaged you know, in transit if it's not looked after properly. So that's what we did. We did various assets, and we worked, as I say, with various embassies as well. And bribery and corruption, you know, is rife in London. As we all know, from various entities with dirty money in the real estate market, but also in the banking system and also in the art market as well. If someone could just start the slides for me, please. Would someone be able to assist me with the slides?
You can start, yes. You can share your screen.
Thank you. So now I'm here in Romania for just over, like Margarita's been in New York for just over 2 years. I've been here in Romania for just over 2 years as well. I worked for Deloitte as well here on the investigation side, but now I have my own business, and we also focus on the same as what Margarita's work is on, compliance and due diligence as well, financial crime training, money laundering. I've just completed a big contract with Mazars here in Romania on compliance, on also money laundering, etc., along those fields. So with corporate and civil law, we also work with lawyers here in Bucharest, a boutique lawyer firm who have a similar background to me. And of course, we work together on not just webinars, but also to fight crime and corruption here in Romania. So if we can have the first slide, and then I can make my way through those, please. So I'm not able to share my screen.
Did you see the bottom on the bottom
Yes.
of the screen sharing? Yes, you can.
Yeah, it's there, but nothing comes up at all. I'm afraid there's nothing there. There's nothing to be able to share.
Michael, can I ask you a question? Like, if the bottom is green, like share screen, is it green?
Yes, it is. Yes.
But it should be, you should be able to share your
Yes.
screen then.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's. Sorry about this, guys.
Yeah, maybe like if the moderator has the presentation, they can pull it off here.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. If someone could do that for me, please, because we're conscious of the time here as well. I will continue in the meantime. So basically, people say about the art world, and everyone loves a good piece of art, a cultural object as well, to go to an art gallery as well. But how can we combat the art world when it's rife with corruption? It's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to point out, because as it's been mentioned before, before the European Union 5th Money Laundering Directorate, there was literally no compliance being done at all in the art world. So you might want to consider becoming an art collector, for a good money laundering scheme as well. It's a relatively stable market and very good for rich people to invest their money without paying tax. Unless they sell the actual article, they won't be paying the tax at all. And it's a good way to increase your money. Also, for the insurance purposes as well, you can also do insurance fraud. But of course, as well, there's an immense amount of inherent secrecy within this actual world of art. And there still is, even though there is a form of compliance here nowadays. So it obviously depends on whom the artist is, and of course what the piece of art is as well. It's a very good way of, as I said, to put your money through their paintings there and take them across borders as well, and escape maybe some sanctions as well, whether it's on you, whether it's on your business, or whether it's for your country as well. And of course, with most, you can also launder your status as well. And of course, proceeds of crime can be spent on art and later resold to obtain legitimate money. If you're a diplomat, for example, from anywhere in the world, and you go to any particular country where you've been employed at the embassy, for example, you can take what you want with you within reason. And of course, a painting can be easily rolled up and put into the diplomatic bag and taken to the country where you're working. Because of course, when you're working in another country, you would like to have something from your home country with you. So until now, really, the art world has not been looked at from the compliance point of view. Beneficial ownership has been rife as well, trying to find who the real owner is. And of course, even though with real estate, like Margarita earlier mentioned, then of course you do have a paper trail, you do have a person's name there as well. But please believe me, even in the real estate world, having been involved with the London property market, you have sometimes the real owner is 5 times away from the particular person that's listed on the paper there. And in North London, for example, one of the ex-Russian prime ministers, he has a huge house there in Highgate, which is being used by everyone else except for him and his wife. It's in his wife's name, but that's quite simple. That's only one person away. It's related to that person, so nothing's really being hidden. However, when you look at other areas which people are buying property in London, you have, as I say, 5 people away from the real owner, because these other people are a form of a caretaker as well. And the same goes with the art world as well, with a nice piece of work. Let's have a look, see what we've got there. Yeah, so we're looking at the art and money laundering slide here on number 3. Thank you. And of course, the proceeds of crime, as we mentioned earlier, whether it's dirty money, whether it's stolen from an official means, whether it's stolen from your drug money, your criminal behavior, whether it's actually seized. Well, you put it this way, in England as well, if you have an innocent article which is not stolen, it's been paid with good money, that we can take that away as well without any evidence of it being stolen, as long as it's then paid to off the confiscation order, excuse me. So transactions under €10,000, £10,000 in the UK, then there's no real need for too much compliance. There's no suspicious activity reports created. And of course, when we look at the money laundering side of things, there's smurfing. Now, it's not those little cartoon creatures when I was young, it's not them, but it's basically, for example, if you go to a bank and there's a group of people putting money in under that amount of $10,000, I've got the example here, then of course that goes into the account. That's called smurfing. And as Margarita mentioned earlier, false invoicing, that's a big thing as well. And in fact, I had a recent client as well with corporate fraud for false invoicing, false contracts and things like this as well. So that covers all areas of businesses. False values. And of course, false values can be done for insurance purposes. And I'll give you an example very, very shortly, what happened at JFK Airport in the States not that long ago, but a few years ago there, about the Hannibal painting there, which you may have heard about as well. But please believe me that art, whether it's a cultural object, whether it's a painting, can be easily transported over various borders. Example, in the UK, okay, there's many people from various countries, all around the world, but from Europe as well. So when we came here to Romania, of course, we couldn't actually take everything in the car or anything like that. It was impossible. So there are various firms, which some legitimate, some not, some a bit of both, where, for example, £1 or €1, shall we say, per kilogram, you can transport your furniture from the UK to Romania, to Ukraine, to Russia, or whatever as well. And that's a very good way of doing things. But of course, it then opens up the opportunity of import and export of articles without customs having a look at these articles. And of course, false panels in vans, paintings can be easily stored there. And of course, I recently learnt on another webinar that even like careers like DPD, for example, you can actually wrap something up there. Cultural objects were known to then transport across borders, and of course the person has then put on the wrong subject for the actual article as well. So believe me, it does get done. There's many vans that around here in Europe that go across the borders, and of course there's no checks at all. When I came here to Romania, the first check I got was coming into Romania by the Hungarian border control. The rest was zero all the way through. So next slide, please. The Faberge Museum. I think we all know about that as well. And of course, there's one in St. Petersburg and also in Baden-Baden in southwest Germany. And of course, I've learnt over the years that there's rumours abound that the Faberge Museum is a conduit for money laundering. Let's not blame all of the staff that are there as well, but the museum was formed by a gentleman called Mr. Alexander Ivanov, who's known to have numerous art deals in the 1990s, when the countries opened up a lot more in Eastern Europe. And he opened up, I understand, a number of art galleries in St. Petersburg and elsewhere as well. But just recently, it's been known in St. Petersburg, one of the galleries which he has links to, that some of the artifacts that have been, should we say, donated for the purposes of the actual, for the art gallery from Faberge are actually not what they seem. We're not saying that all of them are in this particular case, but some are. And this is not just indigenous to this, but let's not just focus on this particular guy, and blame him 100%. This goes on all the way around the world as well. What you think is real isn't. For us, we may not understand it. Like going back to my example with the police, we have to have an expert there from the auction house to do the provenance and who made it and where's it been and other areas there as well. But of course, this money was alleged then to go, as Margarita mentioned earlier, about shell companies and tax havens and places like this as well. It's a way of mixing the money to make sure that it's a little bit disguised, coming from A, from B, into the Faberge Museum in this particular example, and then onwards to other sources. So it's offshore as well. But of course, this dirty money that we have builds up these art collections as well, and also the real estate, as we both have mentioned here this evening as well. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so it's not just about laundering money, it's also about laundering your status as well. So you imagine you're from a particular country, you want to go to the UK, for example, is one example and that I'm going to use. So you're from that particular country and you decide, okay, I want to buy a Cypriot passport or a Maltese passport, for example. Okay, that's very good. So you pay the price. So you say husband and wife, children, 2 children, you pay whatever fee that is coming along. Okay, then because of Brexit and the UK having left the European Union, it creates a little bit more difficulty to get into the UK. So you now have your home passport, shall we say, your Cypriot or Maltese passport, and please remember that Malta and Cyprus were actually British Commonwealth countries, or they are now, and part of dare I say it, the old days, you know, with history. So they have therefore the links to the UK. So now you have your home passport, you have these passports, you then have the right then to go to the UK as well, and without any visas and things like this, most generally. Of course, then you can also use the money, the dirty money, to then go to the other British territories. And I'm afraid to say that most of the tax havens in the world, not all, but the majority, are British overseas territories. We're looking, you know, at various places in the Caribbean, for example. Hong Kong is still partly British until 2047, when 100% of it goes back to China. And there's places like this around the world, which is very impactful, you know, to launder your money, as Margarita mentioned with shell companies. You know, you keep yourself anonymous, and also your property. And it's not just that; it can be, you know, articles as well. So private collections are another area there of corruption as well, because we certainly know that every now and again a painting or an object comes to light from a private collection when they decide to pierce the outside world and bring it to an art gallery, and then we find that it's been hidden in a private collection. And quite often, you know, criminals as well will obviously, high-level criminals we're talking about now, will only let a select few of people to look at their paintings in their gallery as well. But of course, we'll move on as well. And I also want to say here, we're not just looking at the criminals as well, we're also looking at governments as well, you know, doing this as well. And the governments have a duty, as Margarita said, you know, to make sure that the legislation is there, but that's all very well, but we don't want the legislation to be a paper tiger. That here in Romania, sometimes they've got the confiscation regime, they tick the box just and say to the Financial Action Task Force, oh, look what we've done. But of course, they don't do anything with it. So it's a paper tiger, just to say, look, we're complying. But politically protected looters, this does happen. And also, I'm afraid Britain had a big part to do with this as well in the past, you know, looting, you know, for the government, looting for business people in various parts of the world. And of course, it's not on, is it? Next slide, please. So what's happened recently? Here in the European Union and the UK, the impact of the European Union Fifth Money Laundering Directive has taken effect. It has a huge legislation effect upon art dealers and auction houses. We mentioned about 10,000 euros, about the actual the value of a piece of art. You know, with art dealers, they have to have this compliance in. So it should have been in the UK in January last year, in January 2020, but it never came into effect in the UK until June of 2021, a long time, very late, and obviously there were penalties to pay. And because of Brexit as well, the Financial Action Task Force, who come to do reviews on various areas within a particular country on financial crime and financial legislation, it still has that effect. It's just that it's done in a different way now. Instead of route A, it's now route B, and they come to assess independently as well. So what does this mean? The fifth money laundering directive means that compliance on buyers and sellers must be complied with. It must be recorded. There must be a form of beneficial ownership registers of paintings and things. Also, the provenance has to be looked at as well to ensure that this article is that article, that piece of art is this piece of art, this person is this person, he's not a politically exposed person, he's not on a sanction, I say he, it could be a she, on the politically exposed persons list, sanctions lists around the world. Also, the system that has to be up to date and be included with the Dow Jones Index as well, to ensure that the information is up to date. We don't want information from a year ago as well, because that's too old, and 6 months is too old. It has to be right here and now. And Dow Jones, with the various compliance systems, you know, that's really done on 24 hours. So you have up-to-date information, and of course adverse media as well. And certainly there was, for example, in England, a certain African country, the president there was known for war crimes against the inhabitants of his country, and he sent a distant relative to do some work in London. But of course, luckily, the compliance system worked, and they realised that they couldn't do business with them. But just because a person's on the politically exposed persons list or sanctions list doesn't always mean that you can't do business with them. It's done on a low, medium and high risk basis as well. And of course, just because someone has a criminal conviction doesn't mean they can't sell or buy a piece of art, does it? Next slide, please. So the key features we've just discussed there, and it's driven by recent events as well, because we realised in Europe that things weren't being done as they should be doing. Hence, beneficial ownership there, you see down towards the bottom there, and especially increased due diligence because of the COVID pandemic around the world. A lot of due diligence wasn't being done in the correct manner, because the money from that department for that particular part of the job would be then moved over to another part there. So we have to make sure that justice is done for the art world as well. But the art world in London especially was very worried about the impact of the fifth money laundering directive. One, they didn't know what to do. So now they have companies that can advise them accordingly, mine included. Also, thirdly, as well, it reduces the risk factor. How do we know that that piece of art is not stolen? How do we know that that piece of art is not looted by the British or the Germans or Americans or whatever in a particular war zone as well? And of course, the other thing that we need to do, we come on to, is smart water. I want to introduce smart water into this presentation as well, through the Smart Water Foundation as well. But we all have a duty to play, no matter what part here, to help the art world and the art dealers, galleries, etc., in complying with this. Next slide, please. So in the US, what's happening in the US as well? Well, just before President Trump, whether you like him or not, you know, we're not going to get into politics. The US Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020 came into being at the beginning of this year. It has links to the Bank Secrecy Act. It has links to the Illicit Art and Antiquities Act, and also links to memorandums of understanding between the US and various other countries, because we do know that as as money is transnational as well, especially now in the crypto world, is where you could be in one particular country and it goes quickly to another one, or money transfer companies as well. It's done very, very quickly. And of course, we have to have memorandums of understanding to make sure that paintings and cultural objects do not cross national borders without the compliance as well. Of course, it's very hard to ensure that you can't check everything, of course, but you can have to try the best you can. And as long as you can evidence that, this is good. But again, like in the European Union, this Anti-Money Laundering Act in the US brought in the same scenarios really of the art world having to comply with compliance in the US, the same like $10,000 with art dealers, and also the auction houses, the galleries, etc. are also covered in this, much the same as what's in the EU as well. And so that's a new act that's just come in at the beginning, almost a year old now as well. Next slide, please. So crimes against our shared culture. I mentioned to the moderator and administrator earlier, about a friend of mine who lives in Italy. And we've done a lot of work about crimes against our shared culture. And it covers, in fact, all of these areas, all of the contents, and I've listed there as well. And we'll focus on two of those as well, because it's also a corruption issue as well, as we will discover. It's our earth. We're one people, we're one human race, and all of the art and shared culture should belong to us as well. Next slide, please. So here we have ISIS, Daesh, whatever you would like to call them. We do know, and then we see on the top photo here of the slide, two of the guys there destroying some of the cultural objects there in Syria and Iraq. Okay, and there's so much destruction, as you can see here. Of course, please excuse me, looting is not just involved with them, in the current times as well. Various armies, as we've mentioned before, have been involved in doing this and taking cultural objects, paintings away and transported out of the country, and quite often via diplomatic means. Certainly in Afghanistan, if we can go to the next slides, please. Just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we go to World War II first, because it's further back in history. A lot of paintings and cultural objects were bought as well and stolen by the Nazis. Hermann Göring was a particular rich man and from a very high-level noble family from the past. He had a lot of money. He decided he wanted to increase his collection, but of course that was his personal issue. The Nazis themselves wanted to have a museum in Linz in Upper Austria as well. So at times Hermann Göring would have various art dealers, and this is all linked to political corruption as well. He would employ various art dealers, and in fact one of the art dealers that he employed in Holland was married to a Jewish lady, and in fact he actually helped the Jewish lady to escape to Switzerland later on as well, because of the husband's work. They were kept a lot in storage, especially because of the bombings that were happening in the cities. But of course nearby, like here in Romania, there's many salt mines where you can cover the art and cultural objects. And of course a lot from Aachen Cathedral in Western Germany, also cathedrals in Belgium. There was a lot of cultural religious objects that were stolen and transported across the border. And of course the Gerlich collection is a famous one down south in Munich, and there they had a huge collection there which they had to try and save because of, again, the bombing and the firestorms. So a lot of people actually then took the paintings, stored them away. Some have stored them in their homes as well. And just recently, not that long ago, within the last 2 years, some of those paintings which were thought to be lost were actually now, because the people have died, have come to light because the children and the grandchildren have tried to sell them as well. There was from Texas, and I think in San Antonio, they are based now, but there was an American unit specializing in, because they had the expertise, as you can see here with the photos, on making sure that that was the genuine piece, how to record it, how to package it, like we did in the law enforcement days as well. But unfortunately, like Margarita mentioned with Geneva and the Freeport, that's there now, a lot of articles went over to Switzerland as well and got hidden there. And a lot of them are still in the Freeport. And there's a huge, well, put it this way, if you were to look at the length of a road, it will, the whole chamber is a mile long, perhaps more, with stuffed tons of cultural objects and paintings, from the Second World War. But unfortunately as well, Switzerland, having been neutral at that particular time, invited people who stole articles. They wanted the money, but then people from other countries, including Britain, would then go to Switzerland and buy the article themselves and take it abroad as well. But of course, at the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War, some articles even went back to America as well. I remember a very lovely castle style tapestry that was very old, from about 500, 600 years, that somehow ended its way over there as well. And of course, just mentioned about the monuments men in the UK, they have now set up a particular unit as well for cultural heritage. Example, Iraq, where they are currently as well, to secure that the Iraqi national heritage, and also other countries where they are, that British soldiers or the coalition, doesn't really matter, it's the same British soldiers here, wouldn't actually dig down on their off day to dig up an object as well, because we all know where the sites are. And it's also about ensuring education as well for the population. Next slide, please. Palmyra, very much the same. In Syria, we know some tragic events that have happened there as well, and several objects from here. Daesh, ISIS destroyed some of the articles themselves, but not all. Some of them, like that, the two guys with the sledgehammer in the photo there, sometimes they did it just for that and then sold the articles, just to, but other times they would actually smash them and also transport them abroad as well. And of course, where I am right here and now in Bucharest is a good transit point as well for cultural objects that will come through, from the Middle East, which is not that far away as we speak. Next slide, please. Iraq, the same. These lovely articles here. Some, they're now in the museum there in Baghdad, but it's thank goodness that they're still there. I just want to impact that it's not just about the criminal, it's also about armies, it's also about terrorist organizations, because this is one of the things that they do. Daesh did it to fund a terrorist organization. They were very good in one way, because they had tons of money coming in, not just from doing bank robberies, but from selling oil as well. They had people from BP working with them as well, and other entities. Next slide, please. Afghanistan, just more recently, we know from the news, the sad scenes that we saw at the airport there, of people falling off of aircraft, and some people couldn't get out of the city in Kabul. Well, sadly, there's a museum there, which was a new museum, really, in recent times, that's been placed there. And these are some of the articles that would be inside that particular museum. Very beautiful, I'm sure you would agree, and very artistic and cultural. Now, for the Afghan people, they were just getting back on their feet. And of course, for whatever reasons, we're not getting into politics, things changed. And of course, this museum now is in jeopardy. And whether those articles will be lost now, we do not know. we will see. Time will tell. Let's hope not. Next slide, please. Now, there's this case study. Perhaps I should have put it on a little bit earlier. Jean-Michel Bass. There was a painting. This is a true account as well, and at JFK Airport in the US, they found in a shipping container a painting along with other paintings, but let's just focus on the Hannibal painting. It's a very modern piece of art, really, and they had it down, if I'm just looking at my notes here, at $100, I think it was. Something very, very, very small for insurance purposes. But of course, it wasn't that at all. It was actually worth $8 million. And later went on, I believe, if memory serves me right, at Sotheby's for 13 point something million as well. So again, it's down to who the artist is, how many pieces they've produced, but also why this particular piece was in there. It's going to be through this. We have a guy who was a Brazilian banker. Please excuse me for looking away from the screen. Edmar Sid Ferreira. Now, he basically used to launder millions of funds legally obtained from a Brazilian bank. And he did art to do this as well. So, of course, along with other pieces of art, like we said, from other artists as well, he used these paintings to cross borders. He brought those into the US. Of course, this is one of the reasons why we also have in the US Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020, they wanted to make sure that paintings have to be declared as much as possible. You can't do everything, but you have to try your best. And of course, with this particular guy, he was using the art world to launder his money through false values as well, because true values can be very disguisable, and the law at that particular time did not require buyers or sellers the true ID, and as we mentioned, with the real estate earlier. Next slide, please. So what are the problems with all of this legislation? As we mentioned earlier, is it a paper tiger? It's no good having a piece of legislation, no matter what it is, unless it's being used effectively in the courts. So traditional values for buying art are more complex with regards to financial institutions. So what is a ZAR? It's a suspicious activity report. So if you're in a bank, you think, oh, this money's there's something not quite right here, there's something suspicious about it. We haven't got time to go into too much detail about that. It's called a suspicious activity report. In the UK, it goes to the National Crime Agency, which is supposed to be the FBI of Britain. But then it went over to our particular unit where I was to then investigate that. We had a very tight time frame to do things, to do that. But in the art world, these things can actually hurt small galleries as well. It's not so much Sotheby's or the bigger ones as well, because they do not have the means always to verify the identity of the buyer. And therefore it does become, can become quite costly for them. And if they don't have the money coming in, the small gallery could go under as well. So they should be doing suspicious activity reports, or at least report it, to the authorities, so it can be investigated. But they don't always have the compliance needs, which is an area I think Margarita and I both coincide on. So again, there also needs, the art world, galleries and auction houses are concerned that the required compliance and due diligence will hurt their businesses, as customers are not always willing to part with their identities. We know that the piece of art or the person comes from a particular part of the world, but let's see, are they the right person? If the person selling it is not always the owner. So we have a lot of things to do. We have a lot of education to do around the world to ensure that the galleries are, shall we say, eliminate the risk as much as possible. You can't always eliminate risk. You can't always eliminate corruption. Sometimes, and I hate to say this, but some small level corruption might be needed in Africa, for example, to build a school or a hospital. Sometimes, that does happen. We want to eliminate it completely, but I don't think we'll ever will, if you ask me honestly. But we have to do it as much as possible to eliminate the risk. Next slide, please. So how can we then use art, coming towards a conclusion, to fight and illustrate corruption? Well, I'd like to think that all of us here are involved with, enjoy an art gallery or two, and a nice gallery to, nice painting to look at. But how do we spread the message that art can fight corruption? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, of these following points on the left-hand side. Quite often, and I learned this with the slides a little bit before when I first started, is using visual evidence to expose corruption. Art is one of the best social mediators. Art is both entertaining and informative, has an impact upon society. But of course, let's remember, not everyone can read around the world. So why don't we use art then to actually be informative and educate these people around the world? Certainly, I think Margarita can put me wrong or right in this particular situation, but I believe in New York there is a museum about anti-corruption, and corruption, and how a visual imaging, and we have various, and I've looked on my research as well, there's various modern style of paintings which actually depict corruption and what it is. Corruption is involved with all parts of our society, whether we like it or not, whether it's from a housing association, the president, if you like, $100 in the pocket and $100 to do the work, all the way up to politicians, as well. No one is immune to this. No business is immune to it, but we have to make sure that we cover this and we protect ourselves. So I find that if we had museum galleries, and I think honestly in Southeast Asia as well, in Thailand, I think it was, there is a museum there where people go, the youngsters go and see, with their schools, how we can fight corruption together. Because you've got to know what corruption is to begin with before you can fight it. And by using art, it's a pleasure to see what the person has done, but also then to see how you can combat it as well. So it's all about education. And if you can educate through art, then I think this will pierce a lot of the blood out of the corruption world as well. And we're all in this together, no matter where we are in the world. Next slide, please. Okay, and I don't know if you know about this particular guy. Of course, he's a British guy. He was involved with the art world and is an art dealer, and he now faces 20 years in prison in the US. He's been, he left the UK and Europe, went over to Miami and New York, so I understand it as well. And he conned, he did fraud with art, and he conned art buyers out of a minimum of 84 million US dollars as well. And of course, he was as a fraudster does, he sold a painting to person one, the same painting to person two, same painting to person three, and so forth as well. Now, he was arrested on one of the tax havens in the Pacific last year in the summer. American agents actually arrested him there. He's now pleaded, so I understand from the database, he's now pleaded guilty to fraud to that amount, and he will be sentenced in March next year in 2022. But that's the criminal side. Now there's many other little entities dotted around which have many civil claims against him as well because of his fraudulent actions as well. So I think we'll have to watch this space there to see what happens with him as well. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to thank you for your attention. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. I know we probably, with me ran over the time. My friend Alicia always tells me I speak too much, but there you go. So that's me at the end there. So my contact details. So if anyone wants to contact me after this event, I'll be more than happy to share my details with you. And of course, if you need anything over here in Romania or Europe as well, then I'll be glad to assist with the business there as well. I called my business Forum because of the forum in Rome. You know, I've been there, and it's such a lovely to be part, looking out the hotel window straight onto the forum. You know, it was something I've always, you know, I love history and I love cultural objects, and I just want to make sure that all of this area here is covered, and to give you an indicator what can be done from here as well, and to support also Margarita in her work, and Transparency International as well, in Moscow and other places dotted around the world who are doing some fantastic work. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry for going over time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the amazing presentation. So we can now move to the open discussion on how art can contribute to fighting corruption. Does it seem like a viable scenario for you? How exactly should art be used in this case? What kind of artistic expression, in your opinion, will be the most effective to reduce corruption? So that's it, I think. Please raise your hand in Zoom and we will be happy to hear your thoughts on this topic, and all comments are very welcome.
I see there's 7 items in the chat. I don't know.
Hello, Margarita.
Hello.
You can yes, hello, nice to see you.
Okay. Sorry for my English, that is very poor. This seminar, I was very interesting because it's the art as a way to fight corruption is for me fundamental. I work in a legal way because I'm a consultant. I was prosecutor for 33 years, but I think the solution, one of the solution, is in the art, as a way of alerting and motivating people in the fight against corruption, but also, and most of the times I think of literature. The art is a change of mentality in the sense that the having doesn't matter. What matters is the being. And reading literature, of course, can change our minds. When a child begins to enjoy reading and continues to do so, there will be a switch in his mind. The way he will see the world will be different and more focused on being. If we think about poets, musicians, writers, painters, most of them are not rich, quite the opposite. They are not interested in cars or luxury clothes. So I think that along with the various fights that have to be made against corruption, namely criminal proceedings, which is my case, corruption should be fought with education and culture. And this, the art is an important way to fight corruption, I believe. And I would like to hear people from art about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I guess I can thank you so much for your sharing your thoughts and like raising this question. And I believe that art is culture, right? So I perceive like the whole like art world as a culture because it like it's very resourceful and powerful tool in terms of like actually affecting people's mind, because that's like art evokes like a lot of feelings in us and makes us think about various like things we would never like, you know, think in a traditional life. So, and then it comes to corruption in the art world. I think it's like, it's twofolded. It's like, you can try and fight corruption like through art, but it also like, as I was like, you know, like saying in my presentation, and Michael was like, talking a lot about how the art market is corrupted itself. And unfortunately, it's just gonna be really hard to be like fighting corruption with art, given the fact that the art market is corrupted. But I do believe that, as I said, like I perceive art as culture. And as I said, like previously, right now, culture is digital. So, and I think that would give us an opportunity with the new technology to bring up the transparency and to actually like fight the corruption in these ways, because that's why this market was created. So that's my take on it. I don't know, like, Michael, can you please like also share like your thoughts about it?
Certainly, Margarita, I certainly agree with and concur with what you've said, and also what Margarita has mentioned as well, that, you know, certainly I come from the southeast of England, you know, literally every day we could look 35 kilometers away over to France, you know, literally have French television even before satellite, you know, and it was a history rich area there as well, with Roman, Saxon and Norman heritage there as well. And I was brought up with cultural objects on an almost daily basis. And what we did with the schools was all about education and visiting these cultural objects there on our doorstep, but also further afield as well, and seeing how things changed from different areas as well. And history, well, you know, it blew my mind away really what we found. And even in my home garden, we found an old Napoleon coin, as I say, it's very close to France. And certainly the education was a big key for me as well in this particular subject with history, which also then linked in that if you look back in the old days with paintings in medieval times and before, when you look at Roman times and you see at Pompeii, when they take everything away, that it's a form of art on the wall. This is how, because people couldn't always read, how they could actually pass a message on as well. And like I mentioned as well, like in certain areas in the world, having a gallery with anti-corruption issues, maybe, you know, I'm not want to be rude to certain people, maybe they can't read properly, or they haven't been lucky enough like us to have that education. So again, pictorial education is key. Art can be part of that as well on the specific framework of fighting corruption. You know, I've made a little note here. Visual arts cuts barriers. It's entertaining. It has community goals as well. And art is one of the most, as I mentioned, best social, mediators there as well. I find that is also a form of education. We can read, like you said, Margarita, you know, a child with a book, totally agree as well, but it depends on what the book is, doesn't it? You know, if it's an educational book, then that's great as well. And, you know, certainly I should be doing more reading, you know, away, but it's been very, very busy. And I do think that education is the key. We have to promote more, and especially with COVID now, we have the chance to have an audience. Look at where we're all from now at the moment as well. Beforehand, we couldn't really do this too much. It's come to pass. We all feel confident in doing this most of the time. And I feel that a webinar is very good. We can have people from around the world all gathered in one place, albeit virtually as well. And certainly if we can, with modern technology, as Margarita's mentioned, i.e. the cryptocurrencies in different forms and tokens, actually increase the compliance. And I think Margarita can teach me a few things on this particular subject. Then I believe that's, of course, it's a very good thing. And it's very good to see that the legislators, especially in Europe and the States, and of course with the Financial Action Task Force, of actually looking at cryptocurrencies, also looking at the art world, what can be done here. And certainly it's to make sure that crime does not pay. And also with you mentioned a little bit, Margarita, about confiscation and things like this as well. And if I just may quickly just mention, you're totally correct that, you know, confiscation, it shouldn't be a paper tiger. It should actually be involved. When I was in the police, as I say, we had an auction house that would come round for not every single visit that we would do, but also to make sure that that painting there, that object, is the right one to take, even if it was innocently bought. You know, we want to make sure we protect it. And of course, with political corruption in cultural objects, i.e. various armies, you know, even now in Iraq, British soldiers were digging and taking cultural objects, as were others as well, in various theatres, Syria all the way through to Afghanistan. So we have a duty to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And also education is the key. And as I say, visual art by visual means, I think, is very good as well. It passes a message. As I said, Roman times on the wall, lovely paintings, is a message. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for commenting on that. And I do believe as well that education is really crucial when it comes to any type of reality, because that's the only way to kind of embody the future generations and educate them in a proper way. But I just wanted to answer the question that I've seen here in the chat group. I'm going to read it out loud. So the question is addressed for me, do you think that blockchain is the future for fighting corruption in the art world? Also, what do you think about mass adaptation, as the art world tends to stick with outdated business models that are more personal? Yeah, exactly. That was my main point. I believe that one of the great resources to utilize is the blockchain in terms of fighting the corruption, because, as I said, these technologies, they provide full transparency, and they're accessible, and everybody can see the information. So you can think of NFTs as and the crypto world as kind of certificates of authenticity for digital artifacts. So an artwork can be uploaded on the blockchain with a certificate of the authenticity, which will be visible to everybody. Everyone can track it. Everyone can see what's happening to this artwork, where it's currently being used to sell, or to transfer it to some place to another. So it's a really great tool in terms of transparency. That's why I'm advocating for the blockchain in terms of fighting corruption. And it can not only be utilized in the art world, it can be for any other forms of corruption and any other forms of business, because that can be, I don't know, utilized in real estate as well. So the blockchain can embody all the paperwork, and it's not only going to be fighting corruption, it's also going to be a more sufficient way to save our planet resources. So there are a lot of things that are good about the blockchain. Yeah, thank you for the question.
So thank you very much. We were recording this discussion and we'll share it with you all. So today we're opening a call for application for the future exhibition, which is about to be launched in April 2022. The contest consists of 2 tours, selection tour and main tour. In order to participate in the selection tour of the contest, you need to register and fill out a form published on the contest's website, fightcorruption.art, until February 28. And the main tour from April 20 to June 15th. At the end of June, the results will be summed up and the winner will be announced. Also, you can get familiarized with the rules, including the information about the final prize on our page, fightcorruption.art. We will be very grateful if you will share the information about the open call with your networks. And again, thank you all very much for joining us today, and have a great holiday. And it was very nice to see you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well to everyone, and shall we say season's greetings, happy holidays to you all, and be safe.
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing that. That was a pleasure, like, to have these conversations, and yeah, happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.